Welcome, everybody. Wanted to make sure that we had some time to get people on. We had a little technical difficulty, but looks like we have a good group, 27 and counting. Obviously, very, very excited to have this important conversation. And our Diversity and Inclusion Committee within ECA and GoSpace really kind of got this moving forward. And very thankful for all of their work in trying to gather up an amazing group of speakers and panelists, experts, and people that we can listen to. I'm going to go ahead and introduce two of our moderators tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining and remind everybody that ECA and GoSpace are growing and expanding and looking to continue to make a difference, obviously in the LGBT sports space. And we have some great members here that are doing some great work. So first of all, one of our first moderators, Casey Cross. Casey Cross, licensed professional and counselor in mental health performance, identifies as non-binary queer and likes pronouns, preferred pronouns are they, them, and their. Former basketball player and currently working at the University of Arkansas. And very, very honored to have them involved and looking forward to hearing some great things. Our second moderator on the panel is Marquetta Dickens, and her name was spelled wrong on the flyer, so I apologize to her, and we'll get that cleaned up. She, great, interesting fun facts. I love fun facts. She was from Princeville, North Carolina, which is the first town chartered by Blacks in America. So I love those fun facts. Another fun fact, she was a 4-year starter at NC State under the iconic Kay Yao as a basketball player. And that's amazing right there. But that's not enough. That's not all. She got her master's in student affairs and college counseling. She's currently the head coach, women's basketball coach at William Pierce University in Raleigh, North Carolina. And she was also recently voted vice chair of the NCAA Minority Opportunity and Interest Committee. So two very esteemed guests that are going to, actually not guests, they're going to moderate here. I'm going to step back and allow them to kind of introduce the panel and get involved in this very important conversation. Thanks again for everybody for being involved and for all the panelists being here. And so I'll turn it over to Casey.
Good evening, everyone. We appreciate you all joining us tonight. I think we are going to have a really, really great conversation. We've got some incredible panelists, and Q and I will also jump in here and there just to kind of share our experiences. But what we kind of talked about earlier is it's probably best for the panelists to introduce themselves, and that way they can tell you all everything that they would like for you all to know. So whoever wants to kick it off first, we'll let you go ahead and introduce yourselves before we get started.
Sure, I can start. Hey everyone, I am Jeremy Sonkin. I am from Wheaton, Illinois. I'm currently in LA, but my home base is Chicago, Illinois, where I am a tennis professional. I played all through the junior system, nationally, internationally, and on the professional tour. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a bachelor's degree in theatrical performance. And at the moment, I am currently a high-performance tennis professional, focusing on work with top-level regional, national, and international tennis players.
I'll go next. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be a part of this panel this evening, and I look forward to engaging in meaningful conversations with everyone. My name is Dr. Kristen Hardaway. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. I came to Texas many, many years ago. Yeah, I came to Texas many years ago. It feels like forever ago, to play basketball at the University of St. Mary's in San Antonio, Texas. Over the last 8 years, I've been working on the secondary and post-secondary level, doing a variety of things, academic liaison, dual credit teaching. I picked up a few other courses as an adjunct. But right now I'm currently coaching basketball at a 6A high school here in Texas. I teach dual credit English literature, and I'm still athletic liaison for our district.
I'm Charley Sullivan. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. My father was in the State Department, so I grew up in Southeast Asia and West Africa mostly, and then came back to the States at 12, which was rather interesting to see some things line up against what I've been told. I am currently the first assistant coach for women's rowing at the University of Kansas. I coached at the University of Michigan for 20 years on their men's team, which won 12 national championships, just finished their 12th national championship. And I was the U.S. Rowing Collegiate Coach of the Year a couple of years ago. Probably one of the first openly gay men to have been a Division I head coach in any sport. And I'm a senior coach within U.S. Rowing, so I coached the U.S. men to a gold medal at the World University Games in Korea about 3 years ago. I also now Kristen, get to call myself Dr. Charley Sullivan. I defended my dissertation in history about a month and a half ago. My dissertation is called, is called still. I have to remember it now. Years of Dressing Dangerously, Modern Women, National Identity, and Moral Crisis in Sukarno's Indonesia, reflecting where I sort of grew up. And it looks at using sources on women, and particularly women's magazines, to understand large-scale violence in society, including genocide. So that's sort of like the academic side. And I've been at Kansas now for a year and a half, going on just finished our second season, but we didn't get to do our second season. So we got stopped a week before our first race. So.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. Quite an impressive background that we have from everybody here. So I'm excited to engage in this conversation as well. But I kind of want to kick it off by, I guess, engaging myself a little bit. And really, we're in a month where we should be celebrating our identities and so on and so forth. But for me, it's been really hard. This particular pride has been really tough for me to focus on my queerness. And I want to know from the panel kind of how your identities and your intersectionality, how do they show up for you, your identities and intersectionalities right now? Do you feel like you have to prioritize one or the other? And I'll be honest, for me, it's been hard to, again, focus on my queerness, because if I had to, not saying that I will, because I'm all about living truth and I'm gender nonconforming. But if I had to, I can conceal that. I can't conceal my race. I can't conceal my blackness and my melanin when I walk outside the door. And so it's something that it has been not necessarily forced. It's something I have voluntarily educated myself on. But here recently is something that I can't walk away from. I can't deny. The whole world's talking about it. So I just kind of want to hear from the panel a little bit on where you are right now with that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Q. It's a very difficult time, as we know. And for me personally, I've been trying to put, with what's going on currently in our political climate, with the protests everybody's seeing on TV and this huge Black Lives Matter movement, I've been very much pushing that to the forefront while still being able to maintain and tie in my own identity as a gay man as well. I find it's very important, even though we are serving a purpose for a push for equality for Black Lives Matter, especially right now, to not lose another big part of who I am. And that's, being a very proud gay man in addition to a very proud Black man. So finding the cohesion between those two to continue the conversation, really.
That's a great response. I've been personally struggling with that balance. I have, for lack of a better phrase, I have with like a survivor's guilt sort of feeling. And when I say that, I mean, like, I feel like I shouldn't be celebrating anything. I should be focused more on my Blackness, what that means to me. Where is my space in this movement? And I think that's sort of consumed me more so than anything else, is just trying to figure out, okay, what can I contribute to the movement? Where do I belong? Am I doing enough? And I think in that, it's taken me aback to a space where I had to realize, oh, it is Pride Month. I didn't even realize it until I started seeing posts, because, time is like eluding us post shutdown, right? But it's just very hard to figure out what the balance in that for me personally.
So I'm in a different space for some clear reasons. I'm not experiencing this in the same way that Black folks and people of color are. What's been coming up for me is coming from two sides. We have Black women on our team, and we've been trying to work to make sure that they're in a space to hear what they have to say to us. And that at times has been challenging, but good, and hard, and it's been real. And I've been learning a lot from them, not stuff I didn't necessarily know, but I think it's always important to hear again and hear anew. And each generation has things that they focus on slightly differently than, say, others. So in some ways, I'm being mentored by my athletes, which I'm really grateful for, and that they're willing to do that. And one of the points of connection I can have with them is my stories about coming out and my stories about being a young gay man coming right into the AIDS crisis. And there's some points of connection that they understand there, so that when I say certain things, they get where I'm coming from a little bit. They don't know what it's like to see all their friends, dying around them in huge numbers in quite the same way. So the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot is when I was young, when I was close to their age, I graduated from college in 1986 and probably started really dealing with letting other people know in 1985, and people were dying all around me. And I got involved in ACT UP and other AIDS activism fairly quickly. So a lot of what I've been thinking about is what did I learn from that process of like leading demonstrations and leading actions and particularly keeping activism sustained and not just have it like disappear in 2 or 3 weeks. Like, what is it that I can offer from my knowledge there that can be used further? So for me, it's been there. I'm really clear that for me personally, any pride activities have to center Black Lives Matter, because we're in this particular time, we're in this particular space, and we all feel that energy. And I think it's in particular a time to get some white gay people off their asses. And I think that's important to be done. So that's my work, and that's what I'm trying to do, besides getting in there and sticking spikes and white racists all over the internet.
Kristen, you mentioned survivor's guilt, and I think that's a great, or survivor's remorse, maybe that's what you said. I think that's a great term right now, because I've kind of been struggling with what I'm feeling, and I didn't forget that it was Pride Month just because it's kind of been all around me, and a lot of people have been talking about it, but my focus more so has been on the Black Lives Matter movement. And the more that I've thought about it, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I can meld the two together, because, Pride was started by Black trans women. And I think right now is the perfect time for us to celebrate our trans ancestors and build on what they started back in the 50s and 60s. Like we've talked a lot about, the first Pride was a riot, and it was. And obviously I wasn't alive back then, but I think a lot of what's going on now, we can, don't laugh at me, Charlie.
I wasn't there, but I was alive.
I think right now is the perfect time for us to build on what they started. And I know a lot of that came, out of civil rights and everything. So I see it all, I guess I don't see them as separate things. I think we need to be focused on all of it, because one step forward in the Black Lives Matter movement, or one step forward towards equality, I think it's gonna get us pushing the other side as well.
Agreed. I just think sometimes, I think they can go together. I just think that at times it just gets so exhausting, like the work has to be done. And I think that, everybody has their role in the work, right? And I think it's very important to figure out what your role is, so that in that fusion of maybe identities and work and whatever else you want to, kind of build into those intersections, it's very important to kind of take a step back and realize, like, what is it doing to me, right? Is it healthy for me to kind of do that? And is that something I'm comfortable with moving forward? And I think within this movement, I think the Black Lives Matter movement, I think I've seen now the conversation moving more towards that, right? Like, okay, find your lane, find your role. Some of us are going to be on the front lines. Some of us are going to be in the boardroom. Some of us are going to be, making the phone calls or whatever. However, whatever you decide to do in that fusion, again, it just comes down to self-care. And I think for me, it just became so overwhelming because I'm so exhausted. Because I really, because I feel like I'm someone who considers himself, and I've done this intentionally, considers himself a part of like the system, quote unquote system, right? Like I'm one of the ones who feels like it's important for me to get inside, understand what the system looks like. I'm in education. That was really big for me. That's why I came back to the secondary level and left the collegiate level, because I understood from that perspective, a lot of our babies, Black and brown babies, I'm sorry, I call them babies, they're young adults, I'm sorry, but they were coming to us and they just needed so much. I mean, from so many different levels. And I think about those intersections for me as an educator, as a Black woman, as a lesbian. How do I mesh those together and still function within this system that I'm trying to understand, so that once I'm in positions of like power, right? How do I open up spaces for dialogue? How do I open up spaces for connectivity? And those things are all important to me, and I'm still exhausted. So I mean, it's just fair to say right now I'm tired. And then I think about also being in this space and consistently watching our Black and brown bodies, you know, Black people going through so much trauma, you know, and it's just hard. So it's physically exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, and then constantly, you know, I don't have the energy at this time, and I want to be transparent and say that, to go back and forth. So I love, like Charlie said, those Facebook warriors, those Instagram warriors, because I don't have it. I just don't have it to go back and forth day in and day out. But we need that, right? So like that's your role in that space, you know. And so I think I want, if I say anything, or if I, you know, have anything to contribute, I think I would like for people to understand that in the meshing of those identities, figure out what your role is, but also understand that it's okay to like listen to self and practice self-care in that space. So that, I think that's the most important piece to me, you know, in my opinion.
Kristen, if I can go on after that. So coincidentally / not coincidentally, before this explosion, right, I was already being asked by the women on my team to do some thinking and learning about how I was interacting with them around race. I mean, this is work I've been doing for a long time. But this is a new generation. So what I was doing, we have 4 Black women on our team, which sounds like nothing when it's out of 40, but in rowing, like that might as well be the United Nations. Okay. And so, but in trying to do the work to make it a space that was good for them, they weren't feeling good about the work that I had been doing. In part because I was just going in and doing, right? There wasn't really a structure for that to happen. So I was asked to do some training, which actually I was really glad to do, about microaggressions, about some stuff like that. We can always learn more. And I was blessed to be put together with a woman named Brittany Fultz at University of Kansas, who is amazing. And the word had gotten to her that, like, okay, you don't need to do like microaggression 101 with this guy. He has a clue. He's been doing some stuff. So we started at a different space. And her first question to me was, do you feel safe doing that work? And I was blown away because, like, I mean, I'm a white guy. Like, what's my safety important in all of this, right? But it occurred to me in talking with her, so I've been fired 3 times from places for pushing issues of equity, right? And about women, about when I coached at UC Santa Barbara, I had a team that was 40% people of color, like crazy in rowing, right? So no, I didn't feel safe. And I didn't feel safe at Kansas, even though Kansas is a great place and I really like working there and the people are good, right? And what she said to me is, you need to figure out, she asked me, where is my limit and what can I do and feel safe, right? What my pattern had been to go in, guns a-blazing, I'm a white guy, I got privilege out the wazoo, I'm gonna tell you where the fuck to go, excuse my language. I come from a civil rights family, so this was like, you know, drilled into me, and it became important for me to figure out that I needed to go to my university and say, so I've been here a year and a half, and all the training we've done has been on computers with, like, you know, understanding this, understanding that, but we have not had a single discussion among the coaching staff about how to have an inclusive team, right? It's a value. We say it's a value. And I'm not wanting to pick on Kansas because I don't think this is unique to KU at all. What is good about KU is I had a boss who could hear that. I had a boss who, when I came back and said, so we like to say every time we recruit that we are going to have a radically inclusive boathouse. So are we doing the work to make sure that happens, right? And so this was before stuff blew up. So there was already some stuff in space, but this idea that I needed to, or that I had the right to go to the institution and say, we're saying this work is important. What is it going to look like from the institution to support that work? And what I want to say to coaches on here, particularly if you're like the only one who's pushing this where you are, like it's really important to protect your job. It's really important to find the level you can do it at. And I think it's really important for us to be going to our associate athletic directors. It's really important to us to go to our athletic directors as coaches and be saying, okay, we're saying that we want to be an inclusive space. We're saying we want to be a space that's comfortable where everyone can come and be themselves. And I feel I need to do that work. So how are we going to do that? Because I guarantee you there are some folks, I guarantee you there are folks who've already contacted Kansas about things they've seen on my Facebook. There's no way they haven't, right? And we get these subtle sort of reminders that we should be careful about the brand and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, they're going to back me up because I've gone and said, hey, what are we going to do? And other coaches have been able to say, hey, what are we going to do? So I think, Kristen, that like being on the inside is a real critical thing, but on the inside, you still need to figure out how to back yourself up and how to be able to feel safe in doing the work.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I think for me, because I'm not on the collegiate level, I'm in a high school, you know, and I think that's very different because now we're dealing with kids who are not of age, right? And families and parents who are still very much involved. And so that's just even another a mini layered thing that I have to think about because I'm shaping the minds of children, right? And parents they still have a say in, you know, the way in which they want us to engage with their children, right? And so I think as administrators, like going to an athletic director or going on that level or going to our principal or even our superintendent, I think I have to also consider that as well. I think my work is not only vocal in having those conversations with colleagues and those that are higher ups, but I think my work is in the day-to-day interactions that I have with the kids that I engage with and the colleagues that are kind of, you know, more so on my level. And I like doing that. I like doing that groundwork because I feel like I want to give the kids the option of choice, right? And I think that's what education is. And so I'm sorry, I'm not gonna go on that tangent, but I absolutely agree with you. But I do know that just adds another dynamic, you know, to it. So I think that's very solid advice. I think you just have to be super aware, like what level we're doing it on, because it's a very different space where I'm at. Absolutely.
So there's a couple of things that you all said that I just gonna move into this next question. Kristen, you talked about self-care and self-preservation. So the first question is like, what are you all doing to cope through all this? You know, I think as you know, especially for those of us on here that are Black, like we're dealing with a lot of trauma. You know, we've been holding that in our bodies forever. And every time we see another Black body on TV or on social media, it's just like we're being re-traumatized over and over and over again. So what are you guys doing? How are you coping through this? Like, do you all have any coping skills that you want to share with the group?
I think one of the things, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in so quick, but I think one of the things that I know for sure that I had to do was I disengaged from social media. I deleted it from my phone. And I think it's a very weird space to be in because on one end, we get a lot of news and a lot of information through social media. Some of it fluff, or like, you know, some of it fluff and some of it real, but I had to disengage because I had to give myself space to sit in my own thoughts, sit with my own feelings long enough to figure out what I truly thought about what was going on and figure out where I wanted to be. I think one of the things that we get caught up in when we think about self-care is that and when you engage in social media so much, it's very difficult to really separate like what your true feeling, what you feel, and what you're consuming consistently. And I think it's very important to disengage from that. So that's what I did. I disengaged from that. I'm active in self-care. I do the spa thing. I do the massage thing. I do the literal physical self-care in that way. I think I do all the time. I have no shame. But but I think it's important, you know. I think I did that, but I think in this space I had to totally disengage and sit with my own thoughts to figure out, what do I truly want to do? Who do I want to be in this space? Not, oh, I should be doing this. And I think that's when we start feeling that emotional turbulence. Because, I mean, think about it. When we scroll through timelines and we look at images and stuff, one post might say this and you all up in rage, and then the very next post might be something sentimental, and then you're crying. And then the next post might be something joyous and you want to be happy. And then you start getting this sense of guilt because you're feeling something that you don't really feel. So I call it being a sheeple. I'm sorry. But it's like I want my thoughts to be organic and authentic in my own. And I think in order for me to protect myself, protect my emotional just well-being, you know. And I think that's something that I spoke to several of my friends about, is like I finally personally had gotten to a space where I felt happy and whole and all of those things, and then social media just will knock it down because it's this word vomit, you know. It's coming at you left and right, and it happens so fast that you can't sometimes even, let me speak for myself personally, I can't even process it that quickly. And so I wanted to stay balanced. So I said all this to say I just disengaged and spent a little time with self.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. I will genuinely say, for about the first at least 4 to 5 days, when everything was starting to hit its peak, I was glued to every news outlet, every social media outlet, everything possible, just nonstop. Switch, look. And it got to a point, exactly like Kirsten was just saying, that it had to go off. I had to take a beat, and I had to take a moment to, first of all, process everything and the gravity of this entire movement and this entire situation. And then also process, okay, what's my move? What do I want to do? What purpose do I serve, as we've been discussing? And so taking a moment to disengage from that has been huge for my mental sanity, because, and I'm not sure about the rest of you all, but one of the most exhausting aspects of this time has been having to educate others and having an onslaught of people question. And at first I'm kind of like, you know what, like I'll entertain it. Like if you missed this in History 101, like here we go, like you got it, great. But at a certain point, it's like, y'all, do the work. You know, like you're talking about being an ally and you're posting Black Lives Matters and you're doing this and this and that. But if you're not even willing to open Google and do some research on your own, the most basic thing you can do, how much of an ally are you? How much do you care? You know? So that has been one of the most exhausting parts. And one way that I've been able to really combat that are 2 things. And it's been finding times and moments to be selfish and just really focus on myself. And I've been able to do that in fitness and channel everything, every bit of rage, every bit of frustration that I'm feeling in that moment to whatever I'm trying to do in a fitness related way. But also music. Music has been my ultimate way to either zen out, to either listen to songs that encapsulate exactly what I'm feeling in that moment, and most importantly, allowing myself to validate my emotions and how I'm feeling, and realizing that in this entire movement, I have a right to be pissed off. We have a right to be pissed off. Enough is enough. We're done with this. Like either things are going to change, you're on our side, or you're not. And so finding those ways to be selfish and disengaged, yet actively engaged, and allow myself to be vulnerable in my feelings, and allow myself to, in a safe space with the people that I really care about the most, discuss that and be vulnerable and talk about that. It's been a tough balancing act, but it's been keeping me sane and keeping me together.
I've been walking my dog. I have a 6-month-old puppy, and she wants to go out all the time, and she's great. And if you're a Facebook friend of mine, you know I've been baking a huge amount. One of the challenges of having been an out gay coach as early as I was, I spent 20 years having to have other jobs to support my coaching habit, because no one was hiring an openly gay man to coach at Wisconsin, for example, even though I know the folks there really well, and even though we were beating them at Michigan. So one of the things I had done during that time was to be a pastry chef. And so, like, if you look at my Facebook, there's croissants and there's scones and there's cakes and there's pies and stuff, which then get sent out to all my friends because I don't need to weigh more than I do. But for me, that's being about something that's very precise and very controllable, and technique matters and all this sort of stuff. So it's something I can do well in a time when, I don't know, others. I haven't disengaged from social media. I get sucked in, and not in good ways. I do think that part of the work that white people have to do right now is to get out there and challenge people. I'm a historian, so like one of the things that my rowers were saying is there's so much out there. How do I know what's good? So I spent like 4 days like looking through resources that were online to sort of see what I thought was good. And if you need one, we found carryourweight.org, which is on the academic side, but really, really solid stuff. And so we're using it to ask our women to do some homework before we have a team meeting next week. And in particular, they're looking at a YouTube video about No, You Cannot Touch My Hair. That's number one. And then Ava DuVernay's 13th, which if you have not seen that movie, you should go see that movie. It is hard. There's some images in there that are really, can hit you. But it does a great job of explaining the systemic stuff that's going on very accessibly. And then a book by a professor of mine, Martha Jones, and it's something about citizenship. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the title. So I spent a lot of time trying to just find good resources for people at the college level, or at the sort of, my peers are college educated, successful adults in our 50s, right? So they're going to want a certain type of resource. But I think it's important for us to be engaging in that space. Still watching our energy, obviously, as I said, but I think that there's some stuff that we get to say without in a different way. And I think it's important for us to figure out what that is. We took time with our statement as coaches because we didn't want it to come out as like just sort of, a Kraft Lunchables box that is everyone saying the same thing. We wanted it to reflect what the women on our team were saying. We had to do our own work. So what I've been trying to do, and it does keep me sane, is to really think about language that gets used. Like right now we're talking about defunding the police, and a lot of folks are saying, well, that term's not going to work, and they may be right? And I don't think people are opposed necessarily to the idea, but for me today it came out as and maybe I'm a baker, but it's like, okay, restart from scratch. Like we have to restart that all from scratch. So it's not like it's going to go away, but we have to restart from scratch because Black parents are still having to give their kids the talk in 2020, right? We have to restart from scratch because police didn't change when they shot Tamir Rice for playing in the park, right? So I'm trying to find language that's going to work. And for me, actually, getting in the language and thinking about that calms me down. So for me, it is a form of being able to work, as Kristen, you said, find what you're good at. I'm not a street guy anymore. I did that, and I'm too tired for it. I'm too old. So.
All right. Thank you all for sharing. I think I am somewhere in a combination of everybody. For me, I have always had a vision for what I wanted to do in athletics. And I'm going to really talk about what our role is and what we see our role is in athletics. That's going to be kind of my next question. But to kind of share what I've been doing, I'm a little bit I'm really of everyone who has just spoken. And because of me knowing my vision and things like this, for me, the last 2 weeks have kind of been like activation mode for me. So being the vice chair of the MIOC, which means I work hand in hand with our diversity and inclusion committee. This is something where at Garner, I was an assistant coach, so I didn't have much of a voice, or I couldn't say much. This is my first time of being something like this where I'm able to speak. My teams have always been active in terms of social justice. My team at College of St. Elizabeth chose to take a knee. And of course, I as a coach, the athlete is still in me. And so when my brain is going, I have to be active like you, Jeremy. Like I get up in the morning, I can't sleep. I got to go for a walk. I have to do my meditation. So I do my physical aspects. And so I really take care of myself. I try to take care of myself, mind, body, spirit. And so I meditate for my mental and my spirituality and things like that. I do manifestation sessions, visualization, those type of things. And then for my body, it's the physical aspect. And then for my spirit is really to get down to the work that I was called here to do. And I want to talk a little bit more about what do we see our roles as. For me, I see my role as a college coach. I am an educator first. Because I'm in collegiate athletics. I think our first job as coaches and admin is to educate our student athletes. And I don't take that role very, very lightly at all. But one thing, Charlie, that you hit on earlier was resources. And you said something here about, resources, about feeling safe. And I think that's important. Because when you do have certain resources, and Jeremy, you hit on this, you get tired of explaining things to people. It's exhausting. It's extremely exhausting. And that's what I'm kind of balancing right now with the different committees that I'm on. It's like, how much of myself can I give? Even though I get so much from service, but how much can I give, and what am I giving to? I shouldn't be giving to people who can actually do the work for themselves. And then when I tell them to Google credible sources. Do not bring me a YouTube source. Do not go to YouTube. That is not a credible source, And so for me, my question for you all is, do you view yourself as educators in the realm of sports? Even if you're secondary level, professional, I'm collegiate, but do you view yourself as educators? What is our role in terms of sports and where you see yourself right now? And what resources can you share? I know, Charlie, you shared one, but what resources can you share? Even if you can type them in the chat, everyone in attendance, if you have some good resources, just type them in the chat. Because I feel that the more resources we have, the more we feel safe, the more time we can say, you know what, hey, how about this? I can't explain that one to you, but here's this resource. Check that out. Go see that, and it takes some of that weight off of our own shoulders too. And it eases some of that anxiety, especially when we know our space. So I kind of want to hear from you all. What do you see yourself in your role in terms of education and in sports and how it ties together and what we're talking about right now? And what resources can you share to maybe ease some of the anxiety for people who may want to explain it and maybe just are exhausted and don't feel like it anymore?
Yeah, Q, that's a really great question. And I want to just highlight something that you said. As a coach, I think first and foremost, we are educators. It's our responsibility to not only teach and train and create an environment that will allow kids, adults, whoever that we work with to thrive in. But it's very important that we are creating people of the world that understand it, that are compassionate, that have a genuine understanding of how the world works. And for me personally, for tennis is one of the trickiest games. It is one of the most systemically flawed sports in the world for a multitude of reasons. And part of my work recently has been, I wanted to compile things more at the higher level and start getting some preliminary facts together. And so these are more or less some raw numbers, but I wanted to take into account diversity in Division I athletics, Division II, Division III, but then trickling down to the International Tennis Federation, so junior international circuit, as well as nationally in the United States as well. So most importantly, I'm going to start with nationally. In this current moment, as of March of 2020, in the top 100 players in the country, 71 are white, 5 are Black, and then the other 24 are other marginalized groups as well. That's for men. For women, 67 white, 7 Black, 26 other marginalized groups, okay? And that trickles over greatly into the lineups that you start to see in a lot of the top programs in Division I tennis. So I looked at the top 20 schools in the country, and I was able to find that out of all the players in top Division I athletic tennis programs, 159 of those players are white, 6 are black, 53 being other, which is staggering. And then I took that one step further, looking at the coaching staff, 22 of which were white, and that's including associate head coaches as well. 2 are black, with 1 being other, which for me, I had always known to some degree that it was that lopsided, but to start to do the research and to see a complete misrepresentation of what the American dream is, right, on all of these tennis teams, at all levels, it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. And so I think, especially for me, it's become about educating that aspect as well. And one of the main reasons why I think this is because it's hard, right? It is very hard to discover Venus and Serena Williams. It takes effort. It takes a willingness to turn over a bunch of rocks until you find the gem under the one. It takes a lot of effort, but it is very easy to be given a piece of paper or to show up at a tournament to see the players that you have right in front of you and to start basing your decisions based off of what you see. There are so many players that do not have the opportunity, that cannot afford to go to the tournaments, to buy the equipment, to fund the astronomical cost, but also don't have a support system through the United States Tennis Federation to even make it even relatively close to happening, because they're not doing the work. They're not doing the work in allowing these people a chance, in allowing people in underdeveloped places that are financially struggling to work, to fight this systemic issue. And so that has been one of my biggest things going forward, to continue to shed light on that and to draw attention to that and to hopefully find an avenue and a way to do the work that right now people in positions of power do not want to do. That is very important to me. And I hope to be able to link and to match with people that share this exact same sentiment and to continue to bring that awareness, not only just in tennis, but in sports as a whole, to be able to have the sports in this country and everywhere, it's a world issue, reflect the colors of the world. That is the utmost important thing to me.
Jeremy, I think you made some great references, and most people would usually say that sports is just a mirror of, or a reflection of what's happening in society as a whole. And you really hit on things like economic development and poverty and those type of things with the lack of resources. So how can we, as a system, how can we help in our roles? And maybe someone from someone else from the panel can kind of chime in there. How can we help from where we are? How can we help build equitable systems to make sure that our student athletes are having those type of opportunities? Especially, this is important for me. I would like to hear for some people, and then we'll probably open it up to our attendees as well, because I'm in a position to really bring these things to the table and for the NCAA to hear. So I like some feedback personally, so that I can bring these things to the table. We have to identify who do we need to go to, how do we make these things happen, strategize, organize, have a plan, and let's really execute that. So, what do we need to do? How do we do this? How do we create equity in terms of race in sports?
So Jeremy, we're having some same issues in rowing, as you might imagine. And we had a CEO of U.S. Rowing who, when I met with him a year ago, said that his main thrust was to make sure that by 2024, the U.S. Olympic team reflected America. Well, he was let go in January. And I don't know the reasons, but, when one person's let go, it's sort of gone. And unfortunately, the statement that came out of U.S. Rowing earlier this week was, it was just not good, right? So there's been some pushback. And just today, U.S. Rowing came and said, hey, you helped us do a statement on gender and figuring out how to deal with trans athletes and participation in rowing, which they've done. And they probably have like the most progressive policy on gender inclusion in rowing. Basically, you determine your gender and that's it. And like referees aren't allowed to challenge it, or it's just like it's done. But so just today, right before this, U.S. Rowing came back and said, hey, we're having to get together like resources and stuff on inclusion and diversity. and so-and-so said that you had helped out a couple of years on this. I'm sitting there going, yeah, right. So I think that Q, to sort of answer your question, I think one of the things we got to do is like holding some folks accountable a little bit about like, so what is your policy? Like, what is your educational policy with your student athletes? How much in-person discussion are you having with your coaching staffs? All white coaching staffs, as we heard from Jeremy, with largely or mostly white teams. So maybe you think it's not an issue that you have to address, but how are you addressing this issue? And what, how many times are you meeting, and what kind of training are you getting? I've thought that on sexual orientation issues, the athletic director is critical. The athletic director in any school is absolutely critical. And if you look at Ohio State, they've actually done some amazing things. Hard for Michigan man to say this, but they've done some amazing things on LGBT issues, in part because of who their athletic director is. So for me, I think the thing that we can do is sort of say, okay, so what are the expectations? And then, okay, now the NCAA has a really good thing about getting reports back, so you tell how it's doing. That would be my thing. Like make them put it on the line what they're actually doing.
And I'll agree with Charlie. I think getting the athletic director on board some way, somehow is going to be huge, because if you can have an athletic director that's really going to support what you want, what the staff wants, what the students want, they're the one fielding a lot of the questions and a lot of the comments from boosters, from board of trustees, from whoever. And I think if we can get your athletic department or director or whoever's in charge of your athletic department on board, they're going to be the ones to really have the power to say, this is what we believe in and this is what we're doing, and we're moving forward with it whether you like it or not. And I'll just speak for myself. As we've developed like a diversity and inclusion group here at the University of Arkansas, our athletic director has jumped on board hardcore, and I've realized that it is making my job a lot easier. It doesn't feel like we're having to educate everybody plus fight the powers that be over here as to why these things are important. It's like, soon as they all jumped on board, it was like, okay, we don't have to worry about that. We can just focus on the actual education and whatever things that we're trying to put in place. So I think we're at about just a few minutes left. We would love to open it up to attendees to see if you all have any questions. Someone actually texted me a question just a minute ago, so I want to pop off with that. So if you all have any questions that you would like answered, please put them in the chat. Kirk, I'm hoping that you can see the chat because Q and I cannot. So the very first question we'll start off with is, why do you believe George Floyd's death was the brick through the window moment for the Black Lives Matter movement comparative to others that have passed before him? Why are we just now seeing the multi-race, gender, generation participation in marching now?
Don't count out COVID. Do not count out the fact that we live in home. A lot of folks are there, and what COVID has done, it hasn't changed the situation. It has exposed the situation. It's exposed the situation about police brutality. It's exposed the situation, and folks have time to go do it. So I think that's a huge difference right now.
Well, and people aren't distracted right now either. We're all on social media. We're spending a lot of time on social media. So people are scrolling and they're seeing all these things. And so my hope is that it's encouraging them to actually educate themselves to say, okay, what are all these Black people talking about? What have they been yelling about for years? And once they jump in right there because they have nothing else to do, that's when I think we've seen more people move into the movement. Because I remember just a few years ago, nobody would say Black Lives Matter. That was you wouldn't see it on Twitter. You wouldn't see people say it out loud. But now everybody's saying it. And so I think that's a huge part of it, is that people aren't distracted at all right now.
Hey, Kirk, I just got a message from one of our folks that the Zoom chat is currently disabled for attendees. I don't know what he means by that, but how are folks supposed to ask their questions? They can't sort of, I guess they can't type them in, is what you're saying. Shush.
While we're figuring that part out, just throw in there that, you know, for me, the accuracy of history is always important. And this isn't the first time that we've seen, you know, multiple generations, multiple genders coming and protesting together in solidarity. This isn't the first time. And I think it's important to note that because we have been fighting the same fight for a long time with the same results. What are we going to do differently now in terms of George Floyd's death being the, I think it was the manner of how it happened. But you have to think about all the events that led up to this one in a matter of a week. You have Breonna Taylor. And even when you talk about intersectionality, you know, the deaths and the murders of Black women at the hands of police, you rarely hear about. You don't see the same push. You know, and so that's a whole different topic that we can talk about and for another hour, you know, but for now, for me, I just want to, you know, correct that statement of why now. We've been doing this. And that is historical data that we can all go back and read and we can all see. It really looks like something that was just, you could just take it from this part of history, stick it here, stick it here, stick it here, multiple times across history. But my thing is, what are we going to do differently this time?
Chat is apparently open. So, Q, you said something on our chat, which I think is absolutely correct. As coaches, it starts with intentional recruiting. Are we intentional about bringing diversity to our team? Shush. Or do we just do the easy thing and stay in our lanes? And I'm going to go quiet, but if you might say more about that, I think it would be awesome.
It kind of hit off what Jeremy said earlier about how hard it is to find the Venuses and Serena in the game of tennis. But if you are committed to doing the work, then you have to, you know, you have to go out and do some community engagement in Black communities to say, hey, or go and do some camps in Black communities. You know, find a way to support or you know, with a nonprofit or whoever or whatever to bring that sport into low-income communities. If you know that your sport is a sport that's usually the higher participation rates are people from more affluent areas, then do something a little bit differently than what has been done. I think we have to do things differently and we have to be intentional about how we do it.
I agree, Q. I think I'm coming from the bottom up, so I'm thinking more so about changing the language or the conversations that Black and Brown communities are having around sports. And I know, like, just me as a collegiate athlete playing basketball in college, right? My parents played sports in college, basketball, football, track. My brothers played football in college. And so in our communities, a lot of the time the conversation is, if you want to get to university, you know, these are the sports that you're going to play. And so I think like coming into the communities, Q, or having coaches just pop out, hey, I'm going to go to this community, have a clinic, or do something outside of, you know, maybe a tennis clinic, you know. And I think just broadening the horizons for athletes and families and seeing that there are other ways in which they can access college besides, I used to call them the big three, I don't know any other way to say it, but outside of those three sports, I think that absolutely will contribute to the diversity of funneling into college and universities in different sports.
100%. And I just wanted to add really quickly to that point, you know, mission statements go a long way. I'm very leery of any establishment that I'm going to be affiliated and employed by that does not hold gravity to a mission statement that is very poignantly catered towards including the ideas of inclusion, diversity, and equality among all fronts. And so especially if you can create a world and an environment and have the visibility to support that, to do the outreach, that is going to make young athletes and kids and whoever a little bit more, a more welcome to joining opportunities like that. You know, if you don't have it clear, posted, big font, underlined, you know, what is going to allow kids in those statements especially that don't have the resources and don't have the funds and don't have the opportunities, what's going to make them feel included and inclusive to what it is that we're trying to serve and what we're trying to do. So I think that is very important, kind of like Charley was saying, especially with ADs, and it all starts with the mission of what is important in the environment that the sport, the establishment, whatever have you, wants to create.
Well, in rowing, we're an unusual thing because about half of our athletes have never rowed before they start at college anyway. But we don't do a great job when we're looking for those athletes of going into Kansas City. We go to Johnson County, where the kids are already coming to KU. And we need to be better about making sure, because it's a lot of money being put into women's rowing in this country. We're the counter sport for football, right? So there are 90 spots. There's 20 scholarships that we can break up, and we're not, and you don't have to have been hitting a ball and taking a tennis lesson since you were 6 to be successful. So number one, if you're tall and a good athlete, want to work hard, and you want to come to KU, you can give me a call. I don't know if I just broke a recruiting rule there or not, but if you know people who are, you can send them to us or other places too. But we need to do a better job of developing the relationships with coaches in Kansas City, for example, so they're comfortable, they know that things have been underlined, that things are right, and that this is a place that they can feel comfortable sending the young women that they work with as well. So I think that it is about building those connections, as it is in all recruiting anyway. It's just, where are we reaching out to, Jeremy? Like you said, if we just go to the fancy tournaments, right, we are not going to find a diverse population in almost any sport here except the ones that Kristen was naming.
So we have another question here for our panel. Can any of you talk about the experience of how your intersections of your racial identity and gender affected homophobia you did or did not, or do or don't experience as an athlete, coach, or sports leader?
That's a very heavy question.
Agreed.
Very, very, very heavy question. And again, to personalize it with tennis, I distinctly remember the very first time being called a racial slur when I was probably 12 years old at a tennis tournament by another kid. And it wasn't too long after that, that for whatever reason, and I don't know, and for me, I don't think I necessarily presented overtly feminine in any way, but for whatever reason, whether it was the fact that when I was younger, I did have a lot of success. So when you are a minority and you're having success amongst a bunch of non-minorities, you're going to be dragged out. You're going to be dragged out. It's completely inevitable. Still in 2020, still completely a realistic thing. And it's hard to recount any tournament, any environment that I was in surrounding tennis at a high level that I did not have to face that. And that goes through my collegiate career, that goes through some of my time professionally, although I will say that professionally, I had the easiest time for whatever the reason may be. And I can genuinely and honestly say that I felt more comfortable presenting my true authentic self and not being afraid to go out and walk around in the streets in Israel, in parts of Africa, wherever I was in the world that was not the United States. I feel safer in those environments oftentimes than I do walking out of my front door in downtown Chicago. And that's a lot to say. It was one of those things, it was one of those make or break me situations where I didn't really know how to manage it at the time. And thankfully, when I was young, stubborn, and bullheaded, I was able to channel it into an internalized rage that allowed me to tap into this other gear that I didn't know was possible. It allowed me to compete and play at some of my highest level whatsoever. But once you become aware of what's happening and you don't have any answers why, you don't really have anybody in your corner backing you. If anything, you have people saying, oh, boys will be boys, right? You know, kids say things, they're just words, they don't matter, it is what it is. That was the hardest thing to have to try to stomach. So growing up in a systemically flawed sport, being one of very few, growing up in a very white conservative town, I had lived for these first 18 years of thinking, okay, this is how life is. This is how life is going to be. I'm going to have to just put up, shut up, and deal with it. I'm going to have to say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, whatever. I'm going to have to be polite. I'm going to have to be cordial and present a true, inauthentic self. And I learned very quickly, as soon as I showed up at Madison, Wisconsin, that I had been living in a world that is non-existent. It is growing up, having to manage all of that as a child, as a teen. It is one of the hardest things that anybody will ever have to do, and it's near impossible to understand it unless you are going through it, let alone ask for help in fear of being embarrassed and to have to tell your parents or people that you don't fit in. But the fact that I had to go through it, I survived it. It has enabled me to become a person that I never would have thought in a million dreams that I could become. I never in a million years would have thought that I could be on a panel such as this with an incredibly diverse and successful and beautiful group of people that have all succeeded through the adversities of life. It has been, even though it was the hardest aspect of my life, I wouldn't trade it for anything because of the person that I am today.
Very, very well said, Jeremy. Y'all, we are all out of time. I know we have a bunch of questions coming in right now, so we would like to hit on, no, you're good. We would like to hit on just one more question for the panelists. Let's see here. How do we support our queer student athletes of color, many of whom who don't participate in university athletics, LGBTQ groups because they are not inclusive or diverse?
I think the first thing you have to do is explore why. Why don't they feel included, and really face that. And that's something we need to face in our community as a whole. But if we can even start on the small level and within our school and figuring that piece out and have a conversation. There was another question that kind of asked about, are we having conversations with individual teams, so on and so forth. I will go about it the same way. If you know who those individuals are, and you have built that rapport, that relationship, reach out and talk to them. Just facilitate that conversation, give them opportunity to just voice their opinion and voice themselves, and just really actively listen. And maybe the one question that you have is, why don't you feel included? Or how can I make these spaces more inclusive for you? And I think we need to do a much better job of listening to our youth, because they're not afraid to speak up and tell us what it is that we need. It may not be what we're used to, but I think they are very intelligent, and they are very in tune with their feelings, if nothing else.
All right, I think we will go ahead and wrap up. I apologize that we went a little bit over. Jeremy, Kristen, Charlie, thank you all so much for being on this panel. Q, it was great to moderate this with you. To all of our attendees, I appreciate you all showing up today. You all had some great questions. I apologize that we did not get to everyone's question. Hopefully we can maybe do something like this again, or I think just about all of us are on Facebook. You can probably reach out to us and get some of those questions answered, especially some of the ones that are more directed to individuals. Does anyone have any final words or thoughts before we let everyone peace out?
Take care of yourselves, and be intentional in your work.
Absolutely.
Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Happy Pride.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.